All right, what's up? What's happening? It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live on the free Odyssey app, and we are indeed streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/at the Team 980. Apologies. No, like real deep, sincere apologies for letting Anthony Haney's music ride there, and Nelly, you get some good vibes and all. But I was DMing with our guy who just blew up our rundown today. So. Hopefully, maybe as soon as 10 minutes from now, we'll have Teddy Schleifer from Puck News join us. And if you are just tuning in, he's the one who broke the news that Jeff Bezos is apparently out on the Washington Commanders. This is from not that long ago, published within the last hour. And Teddy has had the best reporting around everything Bezos related over the last months of this reporting. He's the one who reported last week that Snyder and Bezos talked last December around the holidays. He's the one who's reported that Bezos is considering but is not committed either way. And now he reports and actually just got the message. He's going to join us at 4:30. So we will have Teddy coming up at 4:30. Anthony, remind me to DM him back when we get to the commercial break. Great. We'll send you details in a moment. Woohoo! All right, so we'll get more from Teddy here's what you got to take from this from me. One of two things is happening. Either this is the greatest game or the most expensive game of tag/chicken ever. This is a game that Dan started and Bezos is determined to finish because they're rich, powerful, and have seemingly nothing better to do. In Dan's case, he literally has nothing better to do. Like, this is his deal. He's the owner of the Washington Commanders. He is going to sell the team. He would like that to happen on his terms, to the extent that selling the team is anything that can happen on his terms, because he doesn't want to sell the team. But end of the day, like, it's not like he's running another company. He's got time. It's him, his team that to sell, and his yacht. Sure, he's doing some stuff with his family. Maybe they play Scrabble. For Bezos, he's obviously got other stuff going on. Like, he's still the executive chairman at Amazon. He's involved in a million things. He's building spaceships. But, like, this is a man who built a spaceship essentially so he could go to the moon. Like, sure, I'm sure the Blue Origin space project had other things that it's doing. But who went to the moon first? It was Jeff Bezos. Or not to the moon, to outer space first. It was Jeff Bezos. Why? Because he's Jeff Bezos, and he wanted to go to space. And so he built a rocket ship that was very interestingly shaped, and he launched himself into space. So that could be what's happening here. He could merely say, hey, Dan, you kind of trashed me in the media because you didn't like some of the stuff that was reported in the newspaper that I own, even though I had nothing to do with it. And because of that, I'm going to make you suffer, and I'm going to make you essentially come to me begging. And it just so happens that I needed some other billionaires to cooperate and not give you your asking price. And turns out everything's going according to my master plan. And so now you're going to have to come, as Teddy lays as a possibility in the story, if Dan goes to Bezos at the end of this and says, hey, man, last chance, it's my current highest bid is this. This is probably going to tick some people off, but if you give me 6, I will sell it to you. Then it gets done, and it's 6 to Bezos, and he takes it. Or he goes, no, I was serious. Like, I'm not doing this. This is not worth it to me right now. And Dan's got to decide, will I sell to Josh Harris at 5.8? Will I continue to drag this out in hopes for another bidder? In the hopes that Steve Apostolopoulos, Canadian Stephen A., will actually get his cash together in a way that most people involved in the reporting on this don't think he's actually capable of? We don't know. It's Dan Snyder. Dan does things Dan's way on Dan's timeline, seemingly. But the NFL does have a couple of hammers they can drop here. They can obviously start, making Dan, or I guess they've already voted to extend the debt limit. But they can drop the Mary Jo White report. They can just say, hey, man, we're going to vote you out. The vote's scheduled. So if you don't have an agreement in place, like, we're going to vote and we're going to vote you out. Or they can try to ramp up external pressure in other ways. I don't really know what those are. That would be cool if I did. Probably would already be talking about them, but I don't. So we'll see what the NFL does. But it seems to me to say that Jeff Bezos is out. And we talked about yesterday. There are complicating factors for Bezos. One, like, he seems to be getting out a little bit of the D.C. area. Obviously, Amazon pulled the plans for one of their gigantic, facilities here. We know that the Amazon Prime television side of things is a bit of a complicating factor. And Teddy from Puck News, Teddy Schleifer, he talked about that with Sheehan the other day, and we played those clips for you yesterday on the show. So, and, rarely do we know another NFL franchise is going to be for sale soon, and it just so happens that the one that's in Jeff Bezos' hometown of Seattle is going to be for sale within the next 2 years. So it's not like Josh Harris, who is bidding on every franchise that's coming up, Broncos, now Commanders. Yes, the Commanders are Harris's hometown team, And for that reason, he might very much want this one above all the others if he had his pick. But he bid on the Broncos because NFL teams don't come open that often. Bezos could have his hometown team up in a couple of years, and he might just say, that one's going to cost me less money. It's the one I want to own more. It's less complicated for me because we have more time to work out some of this Amazon stuff. Also, it'd be kind of weird if he owned the Washington Post and they had to cover the Commanders. Like, that's weird. Nothing that would prevent a sale, but, like, weird. It's just less complicated for him to do the Seattle thing. And it's going to be a straight, and that's the other thing, too. He doesn't have to deal with any of Dan's stuff. He doesn't have to deal with the potential indemnifications. He doesn't have to deal with potential lawsuits, pending lawsuits, criminal investigations. He just buys the franchise because he wins the auction, because it'll be an auction from the estate of Paul Allen. No choices. Who's the highest bidder? It'll be Jeff because he's got the most money. So this makes sense to me. But we'll get more info on this when Teddy joins us at 4:30. What is your reaction, though? Because ultimately, the bottom line here is that Jeff Bezos is out on the Commanders, barring unforeseen circumstances, barring a change of heart. You know, Teddy put all those caveats in the story, but as of right now, Jeff Bezos is not bidding on the Washington Commanders. What do you make of it? 301-230-0980. Your calls on that on the Hoffman Show next.
The Wizards play here.
Be a leftist.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. 301-230-0980 is the phone number. Your thoughts on Dan Snyder apparently not being able to sell to Jeff Bezos. It seems like Josh Harris is going to run away with this thing, but who knows? This has been a pretty wild process all along. Dan is incredibly unpredictable. We'll talk about it with the man who broke the story, Teddy Schleifer, coming up at the bottom of the hour. Got some tweet reaction so far, but definitely would love some on the phones as well. 301-230-0980. Taj, who's always a frequent listener of the show, says, fumbling Dan does it again. Had an easy layup to get the money he was asking, but decided to play media wars and leak information about him not selling to Bezos. So now that Bezos has options, Seahawks, fumbling Dan pivots and is not begging Bezos to bid. I do wonder how much of this is Bezos just being like, I'm not dealing with this clown. If that's something that he thinks. Him just going like, this guy's put out all this stuff and accused me of all this, and now all of a sudden that he wants money, he's coming to me, and I just refuse to be his personal piggy bank. I do think that is a plausible, feasible explanation for why things change. And again, your reaction at 301-230-0980. But I think that on a larger scale here, like, I think Bezos makes an independent judgment. Like, yes, the sale process has to do with Dan, but he's got to figure out, like, which asset do I want and what is it worth? Like, the other thing, too, is, like, rich people don't get rich, especially, like, if you're Jeff Bezos rich. You're one of the best business people, arguably, in the history of the world if you measure business success by how much money you've made and how you spend it and accumulate it and keep it, which, like, separates someone like Bezos from someone like Elon Musk, who sunk $44 billion into Twitter, and it was just going horribly. But, you know, for Bezos, who's built his thing, Amazon, from like an independent or from a bookstore into what Amazon is now, where it's got television networks, it's got a music service, it's got a place on the internet where you can buy literally anything and have it delivered to your house in approximately 36 to 48 hours, if even that long. Sometimes it's overnight or later today. Like, you don't become that rich by just splurging on stuff and going, I got the money. And I think that's another part of this is, like, Dan got this idea in his head, and I understand why. There was a lot of reporting around it, and, you know, there seemed like, or it felt like there might be a lot of different bidders and all these different reasons where he thought he might get $7 billion. He thought he might get $6 billion, or certainly would get $6 billion. If you had told me, and Anthony, we probably have clips if we wanted to really go back. If, I don't know, Mr. King of the clip over there, Do we have any predictions from me of what this team would go for back in, I don't know, in November when it went on the market?
Let me browse this folder real quick.
Okay, I don't think we do, but I can tell you, I would have said November Hoffman would have been like, there ain't no way he's getting less than 6. And I probably would have said there's a good chance he gets 7. It's the freaking Washington Commanders. Like, it's the franchise, one of the premier ones in the league. I mean,
we are the Commanders.
Yeah. And sure, it doesn't have the brand value that it once did, but we're talking not only about one of the sleeping giants of the NFL, but top 10 media market, still the dominant force in a major sports media town. We spend more time on them than we do anybody else, and there's a reason for that. That reason is because that's what people want. And the land itself, I thought, might be worth a couple billion. Like, the land in Ashburn that the practice facility is on is so incredibly valuable because of the fiber line that's out there, because of all the tech companies. Like, if you wanted to then turn around and sell that land and build a practice facility and everything else somewhere closer to D.C. or in a different area, like, that would not be very difficult because that land is in such a prime space. And so Dan, I think, like, very logically was like, I'm going to get this much. And, of course, one of the factors was also that we all thought Jeff Bezos wanted this team. And getting back to the point that I was on, long tangent, long loop, but back on the road, is that you don't get to be Jeff Bezos rich by overpaying for stuff. You have to underpay what seems like market value and then be able to make the profit off of that. It's you're able to see an asset at a higher potential than you can get it at. And I think that if Bezos needs to go to 6.5, 7 to get this team, I just don't think that's what that asset is. It's going to take years, decades, and to get the value of this franchise up to that level, and that's probably going to be mostly because of inflation. Nevertheless, kind of the natural inflation that we've incurred over time. A loaf of bread used to cost 10 cents, et cetera. Not as much as it is like the rebuilding of the fan base, a new stadium, and potential value. Like, will it grow in value? Yes. The media rights deals will help in that. The revitalization of the franchise, more season tickets, like doing smart things that they haven't been doing while Dan's owned the team will help increase the value. But to a level that makes it worth $6 billion, $6.5, $7 billion, I think once everybody got into the books, like, that's kind of when it cooled off. Josh Harris is notoriously not an overpayer. He will absolutely pay for something what it's worth, but it seems like he's kind of capped out at somewhere between 5.5 and 6, something very close to 6, and the number that kind of is bantied about is 5.8. And if he thinks it's worth 5.8, would he, give 5.9 and it's a seal the deal if there was actually another bidder at 5.8? Maybe. But, like, he's going to stick to his guns. He's going to stick to his valuation. And I think that's why Bezos probably is not really that interested in going, well, I got the money so I can. I think that's got to be part of this. He just looks at the asset and says, I can pay for something, let's say it's 4.5, 4.3, 4.0, maybe even less than what the Broncos went for, in a couple of years for the Seahawks, and they'll be worth it. I know it's, for Jeff Bezos, $2 billion is an unfathomably small amount of money to be $2 billion relative to his net worth, but it's still $2 billion. And I think sometimes perhaps we can lose track of that and the liquidity element of it and all of it, and maybe that has more to do with why Bezos backs out than anything interpersonal between he, Snyder, whatever. The man who would have the best answer to that is Teddy Schleifer from Puck News, the reporter on all of this. And Teddy joins us next.
You can take the Team 980 with you.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Top story today, Jeff Bezos punts on the Washington Commanders for now. will he set his sight on the Seahawks? That the head and subhead from the story from Teddy Schleifer from Puck News, who joins us now. Teddy, thanks for blowing up our show rundown today. We genuinely appreciate it. Happy
to sow a little chaos.
Yes, absolutely. So let me ask you the very simple, straightforward question to get us started here. What changed from Jeff Bezos? What did you learn that made you say, it goes from everyone fears Bezos, he's looming, he's lurking, to he's not going to bid on this team?
Both those things can be true. I think there was a lot of paranoia around a Bezos bid from other. Jeff Bezos will not be the owner of the Washington Commanders, and all is said and done. We're saying as of right now, he's currently not planning on submitting a bid, which, could always change, sure. As of now, though, I would bet on it not happening. And the paranoia that surrounds Bezos is, to some extent, founded, right? Because this is a guy who, to some extent, doesn't really need a lot of energy to get a bid over the finish line. Creating liquidity for him would not be difficult. He knows where to find Dan Snyder. It's not difficult to make this deal happen pretty quickly if his mind does change. But as of right now, it's not, a bid is not being prepared.
I guess that's kind of the question, the crux of this then is what's the impetus for the story, right? Was he leaning towards it? Was he considering it? And then he's like, no, probably not. And then why is he leaning towards not at this time?
I'll be honest. I don't have all the details at this point. I think some of the way that journalism works, right, is you're sort of just getting it's iterative, right? You get right. A little bit of reporting at a time. I don't have a great answer for you on kind of what changed. I reported over the last couple of weeks that Bezos was definitely interested in owning a team. I've reported that he even talked with Snyder at one point over the last couple of months. He obviously hired Allen & Co. bankers. So this was not speculative, is Jeff Bezos interested? Who knows? He was taking active steps to try to purchase the team, or at least to explore purchasing the team. And ultimately, as of right now, he's currently not planning to do that. So why that is, I'm happy to speculate, but I just want to be clear that I would be speculating.
No, totally understand. Teddy Schleifer from Puck News is with us. And I think when the most interesting thing prior to this that you reported is that they had met, because there was this idea that they hated each other, that they're just bashing each other, whether overtly or, to friends or subtly through the press. And I just wonder, I understand this is getting into the speculative zone. If you're Bezos and all of that stuff is kind of happening on the periphery, even if you had a one-on-one conversation with Dan, are you not interested in this team because of all of the hoopla around it? It's just complicated, all that kind of stuff? Or is it more of he got into the books, he saw it, he's obviously a good businessman because he's one of the richest people in the world, which I guess isn't always true that that's the case. But in his case, he seems to be a decent enough businessman that he's built a $200 billion empire. And he's like, I don't think this is probably the right financial move or whatever business reason that would go. Is it, I guess to boil that down to a simpler question, is it personal? Sure. Is it business?
Look, there's been kind of, I would say, contradictory reporting in aggregate about whether or not Snyder would welcome a bid by Bezos. I think it was The Athletic reported that he wouldn't, and then Charlie Gasparino of Fox Business is saying that's overblown. I don't entirely know, whether or not Dan has formally, forbidden Jeff from placing a bid or from getting close to this. I'm speculating here, but at the end of the day, I think it kind of comes down to the math, right? If Jeff was offering $7 billion and Josh Harris is offering $6 billion, is Snyder really going to turn down an extra $1 billion because he doesn't like, stories that are written in the Washington Post? That feels unlikely to me. But yeah, another possibility here for sure is that, Jeff, did not think this made sense as a business strategy. But look, I mean, I don't know. I feel like what you see is what you get with the Commanders financially here, right? I mean, obviously there's the stadium X factor, but you know what the media deals look like. If you're Jeff, like, are you really learning that much from the NBA? I mean, I'm sure I'm going to be, criticized by bankers and lawyers who are paid exorbitant fees for this advice. But like, the business kind of is the business. And I don't know if it's really that complicated. You just me to say the chief fees. I understand that. So at the end of the day, maybe it has to do with the fact that, right, the Seahawks could be available in a couple of years. Like, Jeff was not really that interested in the Commanders specifically, is my sort of read on this. Like, he wants to own an NFL team. There are only so many NFL teams that come available, right? Obviously, Josh Harris, for instance, been on the Broncos a couple of years ago. Like, does Josh Harris love the Commanders versus loving the Broncos? Or is it just like, you want to own a team and there's only 32 opportunities and it's very illiquid and, you'd be foolish if you want to own a team not to bid on every single one. So I don't necessarily think it was like a Commanders obsession for Jeff, and maybe if it was, maybe he would be actually bidding on it.
Teddy Schleifer from Puck News with us. I have a very TMZ question, but you've referenced this in reporting, so I'm just going to ask it. A part of Bezos' interest in football, he says it's his favorite sport, but he also, his girlfriend, Lauren Sanchez, who is the ex-wife of Tony Gonzalez, who, according to your reporting, is someone that Bezos considers a friend, like it's her favorite sport too. How's that all work? How's that work that Lauren Sanchez and her ex-husband are both friends of Jeff Bezos, or like that they're all friends? How's that work?
It's not TMZ. I mean, I think it's very relevant to the storyline. Bezos, obviously got this very high-profile divorce from Mackenzie Scott a few years ago, and has very much kind of remade his life around Lauren. You just need not look any further than their Instagrams to get a snapshot of the middle-age love that they have found, and good for them. Lauren has talked publicly about sort of this, I think she called it like a Brady Bunch kind of family where I believe she and Tony have a kid together. I believe that's true. Maybe, yeah, I think it's one kid. Someone can fact-check me on that. So it's a very blended family. Jeff obviously is kids with Mackenzie from the prior family, and Lauren Sanchez is on very good terms with Tony Gonzalez, and like, this is public, right? I mean, you see sometimes on Thursday Night Football, which of course Tony Gonzalez is one of the guys in the field, but you see Lauren and sometimes Tony and Jeff all at games together. It's a blended family, or Brady Bunch element, as Lauren calls it.
And doing the fact check here, they do have one son together.
One kid, okay.
And then he's got, I think, if I'm reading this correctly, 3 others from his
first wife.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah.
Okay. So that now leaves what is kind of the remaining question. And I know you've been super locked in on Bezos, but like, you cover all of this. You're locked into the billionaire class as well as anyone. And Josh Harris is seemingly, according to, if you kind of do the aggregate of all the reporting, the guy that is in big time driver's seat here. Steve Apostolopoulos, or as I call him, because everyone keeps giving me different pronunciations of his last name, Canadian Stephen A. He is trying to put together a bid, but it doesn't seem like it's going to pass the NFL's muster. Like, what is the path forward now here? Also knowing, according to the reporting that you put out today, that Dan could circle back around to Jeff Bezos at the end and be like, all right, man, last chance. And then Bezos could go, well, okay, in that case, here's your check.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, look, to some extent, you could argue that, none of the facts have really fundamentally changed, right, which is that Josh has always sort of been in the driver's seat. He has a fully financed, $6 billion bid. The Steve Apostolopoulos, I don't know how you pronounce it. I'm gonna call him Steve. The Steve bid, is at 6, but like, I know there's been some question with the financing there. I think Josh Harris is still the favorite for this thing, and that hasn't really changed. He has a bid that looks like a conventional bid, and it's been. Checks all the right boxes. He's got kind of this consortium of well-wishers and celebrities, and Josh has owned a professional sports franchise before. So this is not. It's a safe path. To take Josh's bid does not require reassessing the conflict of interest policy with like media deals, like I think taking a Jeff bid would. So it's sort of simple. And if Snyder wants to get back wants to circle back with Jeff at the very end of this, that obviously is still on the table. But, I think if you're betting on, on predicted or whatever the equivalent is, I don't think this is a DraftKings betting line, but, I feel like you would.
We're a BetMGM show personally, but that's fine.
There you go. Can you bet on who wins an owner?
I don't think that's on the book in our place, but someone somewhere.
I don't know. I mean, the Josh Harris line, is looking pretty inviting at this point.
Yeah. Do you think, from what you've been able to garner, that it will get done by these owners' meetings coming up in May, which is kind of what the NFL is certainly hoping?
Yeah, I don't have a great sense on that. I mean, I think people who kind of are better sourced in the league would have a better sense on that. But I mean, it definitely is crunch time here. Snyder obviously is only committed technically to like reviewing strategic transactions or whatever bullshit he said. So he theoretically could, take this as long as he wants. But as of right now, I feel pretty confident that like this is going to get done at some point. The Josh bid is. I think this could be done quickly if you really wanted to. It's really a question of not logistics, but of, Dan Snyder, sipping a tequila on the beach and deciding what he wants to do with his life. I mean, that's I don't know how long that takes, right? I mean, that sort of depends on how neurotic any of us are. It doesn't really depend on business.
Yeah. Teddy Schleifer is with us from Puck News. Real quick on that front, because that is something I've heard as well, kind of in I don't want to call it reporting that I'm doing, just talking to a bunch of people who are covering this, both in radio interviews like this or, just kind of talking to people off air, is that this sale has been so bizarre because of Dan and that he is just a different person. He operates in his own way, on his own schedule, doing things that make absolutely no sense to other people. And like sometimes simple things like getting a response to an email or getting him to pick up the phone for a very basic functional thing has been incredibly difficult. Have you heard things like that throughout this process? Or is that something that has escaped your purview so far?
Yeah. I haven't heard that. That's very interesting. Tell me more. Like what's this like? Is that just kind of his personality, or what do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I don't want to go too deep into it in part because it's not my original reporting, right? Like I don't want to be spilling what other reporters are perhaps working on or what they haven't obviously put out with enough confidence that they're reporting it themselves. But the general sense I get from talking to multiple people covering this, and I've had multiple people say this to me who are covering this, is that he just kind of does things his own way. If a simple, hey, we needed the signature on this file is the kind of thing that used in a different sale, in the Broncos sale, would get done in a day because you call the person, they do it, and that's their job. That getting a hold of him, it can be incredibly difficult. And that is one of the reasons why this process has been so much slower. And I would say for those of us covering it specifically here in D.C. from a very local, like fan-driven level, has been incredibly frustrating because it's been drawn out. Because some of the kind of basic dotting of I's, crossing of T's, that is just the simple run of play in other business transactions is incredibly difficult to do with him because he's just bad at doing all this stuff.
Absolutely. That makes sense. I mean, look, easy for us to say. Neither of us have been, billionaire owners of an NFL team. And I imagine, for Dan, who's, his wife Tanya, who owned this franchise for what? 20, 25 years, letting go is hard. I thought about selling my car, and I've wasted more time on that than I have on Dan Snyder trying to sell this NFL team.
Yeah, I mean, another thing that I've said all along that folks need to remember is like his entire identity was being the owner of his team, and to give up on your identity is something that's not going to go on easily. But it's his fault, so there's that.
Also the bit to make this, not to reduce this just to dollars and cents, but I think the feeling around sports franchises in general is that these are sort of like inflation retardant assets
right.
that at a time when it just feels like sports franchises, because of obviously limited supply, like keep going up and up in value. So if you're Dan, you're selling this in 2023 for $6 million. Like, what if you look dumb in 10 years for not selling it for, $600 billion or something? I'm joking, but like, something greater, 10 years from now, or giving it to the kids, or, who knows what kind of games you can play with from a tax perspective. I mean, so it's not only a sense of like belonging, but I think there's also a sense that, maybe it's just bad business sense to sell it right now. Though, Dan obviously has political and regulatory and legal reasons why, he might want to consider selling. But from a business perspective, it's not just kind of psychological. I think there's actually a feeling that, you should sell this to the best bidder, and the best bidder might be in 10 years.
Right. And he obviously, if it's up to him, he keeps it. And even if he doesn't get to do anything and Tanya runs it, he gets to give it to his kids, which was always his goal. But it seems that, the consequences of his actions, they're coming to get him. Speaking of that, though, like the general kind of market right now, as you look at the folks that you cover, and again, Teddy Schleifer, who is a writer for Puck News, who covers. Am I describing your beat correctly? You essentially cover billionaires. I
cover rich people who want to buy teams.
Right.
I mean,
but also other things, right? And it's one thing to look at the Angels and their sale, which they were pulled off the market, or Manchester United is in a really weird spot right now, which is perhaps the best comparison for the Commanders, because although it's a different country, different league, whatever, like you're talking about a legacy franchise that when it happens, depending on the order that these two teams sell, is going to be the most expensive sports transaction in the history of the world. So like the fact that has kind of slowed down and been an interesting one to watch. But also if you look at other, big giant M&A type of things, or companies being bought out at these kinds of prices, what is the kind of bigger picture market in terms of the business side of this right now?
In terms of all teams, you mean? Like all sports?
I would say all teams, all sports, and anything else that someone buys for $6 billion.
I mean, look, I think the one big trend that's happening right now is wealthy people who want to buy, or want the fun, frankly, of like being a professional sports owner, or like going into things outside of the four major professional sports. With MLB, NHL, NFL, NBA, there's 120, 125 teams. And how many sales are there a year of these things? Like 3 or 4? Like what? I mean, the Suns were just up. I think the Timberwolves were up a couple of years ago. And you're seeing people, like lots of wealthy people, get into like Formula One teams, right? Or a big storyline in the world of billionaires is women's soccer. Lots of wealthy people, like Sheryl Sandberg was involved recently in creating a women's professional soccer team in the Bay Area. So you're seeing wealthy people go outside of the four major sports. You're seeing billionaires go into like esports too, right? I think there's just a limited number of teams, and when people buy these things, partially for tax reasons, they're unlikely to sell, and so they want to pass it to their heirs. And you really only see kind of major sales when there's some like scandal, right? Like Robert Sarver or Don Sterling or Dan Snyder. I mean, that's when you see these things actually happen. So that's a big trend right now, and is that these assets are you're sort of seeing leakage to non-professional or non-major sports leagues. And I think that's going to continue. That's part of the reason why lots of these leagues are considering expanding, right? I mean, there might be a new NBA team in the next couple of years. Who knows? Maybe the NFL will expand at some point. Like there's lots of business reasons to make the leagues bigger. Part of that is you can invite in a whole new team with a whole new owner, and that pushes up its supply and demand. You create greater demand for these teams and greater supply, and suddenly you're talking real money.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Kathy Engelbart over the WNBA is like, we don't want to fail. Like, Kathy, wake up. Hello. All right, last thing I want to ask you, though, is where does this leave Bezos? Because now he's still a guy who's got more money than basically everybody else on the planet, and he would like to own an NFL team according to things he's telling people and has been telling people for a long time, but it's not going to be this one. The Seahawks are still out there. That doesn't get rid of the Amazon conflict issue, which I know you talked about with Sheehan. We actually played that bite on the show. I think it was yesterday, 2 days ago. But that's still looming as an issue for him. Where does that leave Bezos if he indeed doesn't change his mind and doesn't buy the Washington Commanders?
I would expect, the Seahawks to be definitely in Bezos' sights. I'm not an expert on that situation. My understanding is like Jody Allen has to sell it in a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
Okay, right. I know it had something to do with kind of the trust situation with Paul Allen. So, that's a possibility. I could see it's sort of hard to tell like when these teams will come up. I mean, I will say, Bezos is only like 55, and he is in a moment in his life right now where he is doing sort of almost reinventing his kind of routines, right? He bought the Washington Post in 2013. He is, recently spent a couple of days at the Post building, like trying to tend to kind of the crises there. He's gotten very involved with philanthropy. He started a climate change fund recently, along with a network of kind of Montessori preschools. So, like, it's not as if he's, like, sitting around all day, like, moping about his inability to get an NFL team, right? He's got other stuff going on. He's still the executive chair and largest shareholder in Amazon. But I think the next beat in this saga is, like, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a final, hey, are you buying this team sort of conversation, in the next couple of weeks. And I also wouldn't be surprised if, Bezos is the front runner for the Seahawks in a couple of years. So that's the next step.
Teddy, this was great. Very much appreciate your time, your insight, great reporting, and I'm assuming when you do more, we'll be back in touch and have you back on the show.
Thanks so much.
All right, Teddy Schleifer, everybody, from Puck News. So that's super interesting because in a lot of ways, Teddy was like, yeah, there's not a lot that's changed. He's just, leaning harder in one direction, but not it's kind of like, hey, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do. Probably not, but maybe. And now we're just closer to the deadline. And so it's going to involve a change of heart for him to ultimately get in on this. But it's kind of like when you are thinking about going somewhere. You're like, yeah, I'm thinking about it. Like, I don't know. Like, we'll see. And in the back of your head, you're not leaving your house. You never even got dressed for that party. You were never going. That's kind of what this feels like. Could you at the last minute? Your crush, you find out they're going to be there? Or whatever other thing might motivate you to go? Whether it be positive motivation, something that you're looking forward to, or guilt. Oh, God, I've canceled on them the last 3 times. Oh, I better put pants on. That's kind of what this feels like. That at the end, it's like, hey, you sure you don't want to come? Yeah, I'm good. I'm gonna stay home. And we're closer to that conversation, or maybe that conversation has happened now. It's just that the party doesn't start for another couple of hours. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Quick detour from this story next. John Alrand is going to join us talking about YouTube TV's deal with the NFL. We can ask Alrand, too, about the Bezos Amazon, potential conflict of interest. That's certainly within his purview. John Alrand joins us from Sports Business Journal next. All right, it's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. So we'll have Kevin Sheehan a little bit later. We're still trying to figure out the details on when Sheehan was going to come on. He was going to join us after Teddy if we had time, but we went along with Teddy Schleifer, which was great. Right now, we're going to have John Aueran in 30 seconds talking about the YouTube TV stuff. Damon Mendelara scheduled to join us today as well. So we got a bunch of guests. We got a bunch to talk about. And without further ado, let's get right to it. It is time for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
And we do welcome in from the Sports Business Journal our guy, John Aueran. John, good to talk to you, sir. How are you?
Doing great. How are you?
I am doing well. We had a show planned, and then Teddy reported from Puck News that Bezos is out on the Commanders, and it was a blow up the rundown kind of day. Except for we built a nice fort around 5 o'clock. We weren't going to cancel on you. No way.
Come on, YouTube. That's bigger than Bezos, isn't it?
Well, the funny thing is, John, they might just be related. And actually, that to kind of close the loop on some of the Bezos stuff, let's kind of merge that with your beat in terms of sports media, because one of the things that Teddy has talked about and that we talked about 20 minutes ago is that the media rights deal between Amazon and the NFL could be a complicating factor for Bezos' ownership of the Commanders, or now that he's apparently not going to bid on them, any other team. How reworkable is that? How big of a deal do you think that is moving forward for, say, if he wants to buy the Seahawks, if he indeed is out on the Commanders?
It's a deal. So it is real, but it's very easy to get past. So they just have to, keep Bezos off of whatever committees would be involved with that. There are ways forward to where they could work with Bezos on that. So I see it as a minor speed bump that they would have to get through rather than some sort of big, this is why he can never bid on a team.
Got it. So, well, now that that's out of the way, we can get back to the reason we initially had you on. So the details are now kind of out from the consumer side on YouTube TV's takeover of NFL Sunday Ticket. We known that it was going to be on YouTube TV. Once you saw the numbers and saw that the price is going up and all of the things that kind of go into that package, the things that are available, the things that are not, what did you make of the details of the deal?
Yeah, I found it to be wholly unsurprising, to be honest. This deal, Sunday Ticket for the NFL, has always been – they've always said that they needed to put a premium price on it. And that's because they don't want to take viewers away from Fox and from CBS on Sunday afternoons. Fox and CBS both are paying more than $2 billion a year for this. And Sunday Ticket is taking their production, is taking their announcers, and even though you can see you can see the advertising, it's taking away the local advertising. And just as importantly for the networks, one of the reasons the NFL is so big is you have such a big audience watching the game, and then by inertia you stick on and you watch the channel afterwards. If you're on Red Zone, you're not sticking on Fox. You're on Sunday Ticket. So they want to do whatever they can to keep Fox and CBS happy enough to continue paying $2 billion, because what they have been doing on Sunday over the past 20 years or 30 years since Sunday Ticket launched is the games on Sunday afternoon are getting stripped thinner and thinner. You now have a full season of Thursday night games. You now have several international games that are in the morning. You have NFL Network that has to have about 4 games on Saturdays toward the end of the season, and Sunday afternoon, which is what Sunday Ticket is. It's really a lot thinner in terms of competition than it was when it launched back in the mid 1990s.
That's interesting because in some ways that feels. I mean, in some ways it feels in line with. In some ways it feels in conflict with the other leagues who are putting all of their games behind a paywall. Like for the NFL to prioritize linear television, I guess is what I'm saying, is like that is an interesting strategy. Is that just because they are still the NFL and they know they have more people watching compared to a Major League Baseball or an NHL or some of the soccer leagues that are willing to put all of their content, or like MLS, literally every game is behind a paywall. They don't care about linear TV. Why is the NFL still prioritizing that as opposed to figuring out how to monetize the digital side of it and having more control potentially over the product?
Well, part of the reason is because they're getting paid handsomely by linear TV.
That
the
helps.
second part is that, yeah, exactly. If they weren't going to pay, they would have. You take a look what happened to MLS. The linear TV wasn't going to pay for Major League Soccer, and they're now behind a paywall at or a few games in front of the paywall, but they're streaming solely at Apple TV Plus. But this has always been part of the NFL's media strategy, going back to the 1960s, where they prioritized broadcast television. So during the rise of cable, when ESPN started growing and Turner started growing, they made sure that they had the worst package of games, the best package of games that they had, they would give to NBC and Sunday Night Football. If you recall, when ESPN got Monday Night Football, that was a particularly rough package of games that they got there. So they prioritized broadcast over cable, even as cable was rising. And we're seeing that also with streaming. So one of the things about, if you look at overall trends in the business, and you look at the rise in Netflix and you look at the rise of Amazon Prime and all HBO Max, all these other streamers, it's undeniable that that's how people are going to increasingly consume their video. But if you want to watch NFL games, they're just about to embark on an 11-year deal. So until 2033 or 2034, I'm not sure when it ends, you're going to watch NFL games on traditional old television, and that's where their bet is. Television still brings in the biggest number of fans to watch, advertisers like that, and it's what served them well for the past half a century.
Are you surprised? John Hourand is our guest, Sports Business Journal, just tremendous top flight sports media reporter. If somehow you have been missed his work over the years, just as good as it gets. Are you surprised that there wasn't any kind of like what NBA does with League Pass, where you can buy a single team package? So if you are a displaced Commanders fan who lives in San Francisco now, that you could buy just the Commanders games in the same way that if you were that same DC sports fan displaced somewhere else, you could buy the entire Wizards package if you wanted to gouge your eyes out 82 nights a year? Sorry, I shouldn't have done that. That was mean. I've just been on a Wizards kick lately. That was uncalled for. But we can just pretend I didn't do that and answer the question.
You're not going to make me pay for a Wizards package, are you? I think that's the whole idea of now that it's with YouTube and it's with the streamer, you're going to see the league and you're going to see YouTube start to experiment a lot more with the packages that it puts out there. So that the YouTube is going to come out. I don't know if they've announced this yet or not, but they're going to come out with a mid-season package. So for a discount price, if you just wanted to watch from week 8 through the end of the season, you can buy that. That's never been on offer before. But they have stayed away from doing the buy a single game or buy just a single team's games for that same reason, where they want to keep this as a premium product. So you just have to pay one big fee and then you get everything on that. Another one of the reasons for not doing that is I don't know about the Commanders next year, but to take a team that's really popular on TV, like I hate saying this in Washington, but like the Cowboys or something along those lines.
Sure.
About that they max out in terms of prime time games that are played. So those aren't even in the Sunday Ticket subscription. And then, like, if you live in D.C. as I do, I think you could have seen all but maybe 2, maybe 3 Cowboys games last season. So if you think about what Sunday Ticket is for, it is for the displaced Commanders fans, or it's for the displaced Jaguars fans, or Houston Texans fans. And so it's the teams like the Packers or the Steelers or the Cowboys that are traditionally really big media draws. Their games generally aren't what drive Sunday Ticket sales.
John Hourand, Sports Business Journal, with us for a few more quick minutes here on the Team 980. This, of course, is the Hoffman Show. So the other side of this equation beyond the NFL is obviously the YouTube TV side. They are in a fight with the Fubo TVs of the world, with Hulu and the other streaming services. What is YouTube hoping to accomplish here?
You're going to want to what they're hoping is that you used to be a DirecTV subscriber because you got Sunday Ticket. Now you're going to become a YouTube TV subscriber, and you're going to still get Sunday Ticket, and that they're going to be able to increase their subscribership for YouTube TV. And as they get more subscribers at YouTube TV, and YouTube TV becomes more popular than, say, Dish Network, which is a satellite provider, or starts to rival DirecTV, all of a sudden the prices, the wholesale prices that YouTube TV has to pay for all the different channels is going to drop, because as they sort of gain more subscribers, they have a lot more leverage, and they'll be able to pay less for the channel. So there is a benefit for the overall business that has nothing to do with the NFL, but it's partly growing off of the NFL's back.
So I remember when I've officially cut the cord and been that way for like a year and a half, 2 years now. And it's because you have these services that are basically like cable now, but there seems to be holes in all of them. For instance, and this is not an ad, if Fubo TV would like to sponsor me, they're more than happy to reach out to our sales department. I would say the same for Hulu and YouTube TV and anybody else as well. But I happen to have Fubo TV, but I can't watch Turner products. I have to have a separate login because the TNT, so like the NBA playoffs, are difficult for me to get, and they're not in the same place as all my other channels. So all the other ones have their various holes as well. Do you think that one of these, as the fight continues in the sports rights space, that one of these places is kind of going to be as complete as a full cable provider? And at that point, why did we all cut cable in the first place?
I think that's the big question. I think people are starting to realize that the cost effectiveness of the cable bundle is really great, considering now that think about the poor soccer fan that now has to buy ESPN Plus and Paramount Plus and Peacock and whatever, Fubo, all these different streaming services.
It's me. I'm the poor soccer fan, and I just drew the line. I'm not watching MLS ever.
Apple TV Plus, there's another one.
Well, because that's the thing is, even if you have Apple TV Plus, which I do, so I can watch like Ted Lasso and the Jon Stewart show and all that kind of stuff, you have to buy another season pass on top of that to get MLS.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I live in DC. I'm a happy Xfinity fan. I pay too much for it, but that's where I get. If they get rid of Masson, and if they get rid of so I can't see the Wizards or the Big Ten Network, I'm going to whatever has those three, and I think that's one of the things in the media business right now, particularly in the cable business, is that my wife doesn't like sports, and she would have cut the cord years ago. I like sports, so we still are tethered to the cord. The only people that are now paying for cable are hardcore sports fans like me, or people that want to see live news or live entertainment. Anybody, think about your own life. Any entertainment show, you're not sitting through commercials. You're binge watching it on one of 10 streamers that are out there. And so that's where a lot of these networks like ESPN or Turner, they have a lot of leverage over these companies like YouTube TV or Comcast for that matter.
Yeah, Fubo doesn't have Masson. I can't watch the Nats. If the Nats become good, that becomes a problem. For right now, I would just be like, oh, they lost again. So that's John. This has been a problematic interview. I'm just going to get myself in trouble with the Wizards, with the Nationals. I think I'm going to let you go enjoy the rest of your day before I get myself in more trouble. This is really more about me than you.
The Wizards, at least they're spending. The Nationals, bring some players. You can watch the Orioles on Masson and be very happy this year.
That's true. My good friend Kevin Brown on the call. And obviously probably the next time we'll have you on because we got to be due for an update soon is this court case going on, which will actually decide how much those rights are worth in the first place, which means maybe they can sell the team, which means maybe they can sell money or maybe they can, spend money.
Yeah, Craig, we've been saying soon for a decade now, so I don't know when soon is on that.
That was me stopping holding my breath. All right, John, appreciate the time as always. Thank you, sir.
Anytime. Thanks for having me, man.
That's John Alrand, everybody, with us from the Sports Business Journal. He is so good. Always grateful for him joining the show. I will say this, I haven't had Sunday Ticket in a while. It is really nice. I had it, actually, Anthony, in college, when I lived off campus my senior year. My house was the spot on Sundays because we had DirecTV and we had Sunday Ticket. Me and my senior year roommate, and everyone would just come over. We get wings and pizza from Varsity, and then we bring them over to my place, which is on Genesee. We didn't start searching fast enough, so we got stuck all the way down on Genesee. Yeah. Talking Syracuse for those that if you know, you know.
Yep.
And we had Sunday Ticket. And it was awesome.
Nah, Sunday Ticket is definitely a good, I guess, perk to have. I actually have it at Georgetown Prep. I get spoiled being at Georgetown Prep. But the thing is, we're moving away from DirecTV, and I think we're about to go with Verizon Fios. So I'm not too happy because now I definitely won't have a ticket anymore. But, I know some streaming sites. So, yeah.
Anthony, don't say that into a microphone.
You might be right.
What are you doing? But I mean, if Fubo, I would say this, I've got Fubo now. Again, if anybody wants to buy, I'm available for sale. If you want to pay me to have your streaming service and talk about it, as opposed to me paying you, that would be great. I'm available to all advertisers and all cable companies. I'll go back to having cable as long as you're the one that my apartment complex allows. Point is that if I was deciding between these services and all of a sudden I could get a pretty significant discount on Sunday Ticket, it is the kind of thing that might pull me to YouTube TV. But if I'm also remembering correctly, I feel like YouTube TV might not have had NFL Network, which is part of the reason I don't think I got it. So I'd hope they work that out as well. But it sucks because what you realize when you start, at first it was I'll get ESPN Plus and Peacock and Paramount and okay, that's all I need. And then you realize you kind of want to watch that one other show, and then you kind of want that one other thing, and you need a log. Can you get NBA TV through the NBA app? Yeah, but you need a cable login. So you wind up just going to another version of cable, and it's not as reliable because it streams, and so it's digital, and most of the time the picture is great. But every once in a while, too many people are on the internet, apparently, in the world, and your picture gets a little fuzzy. One of the things that I saw about YouTube TV in particular, it's one of the slowest streamers. So you're looking at the biggest delay compared to real time. And that's something that I feel sometimes on a Sunday. I'll be sitting there watching the game and tweets are happening from reporters at the game. And the delay is significant enough that I see the tweets and then I look up and I'm like, oh, this is about to be a touchdown. And so there's little things that do kind of make me wonder, would I just be better off going back to cable? Do this because it actually has everything. But I think YouTube TV obviously pulling Sunday Ticket is something that is going to drive them and make them one of the biggest things. And they've been investing in sports majorly in a big time on the advertising side. I mean, they've been the sponsor of the NBA Finals the last couple of years. So I'm curious to see if there's a shift there, and also what someone like Fubo does, my current provider does, to try to keep up. What do they offer? All right, it's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, our good buddy Damon Amendolara joins the show. We'll talk to him about the news that Jeff Bezos is pulling out of the Commander sale and what else is going on as we head towards the NFL draft. DA next on the Team 980. 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Is that just me, Anthony, or did the music drop out? What happened there?
I don't know. I haven't.
That wasn't just my headphones?
Nah.
It just died.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Love when that happens. Just stuff all over the place. With that incredible introduction, just steamrolling into the interview, we welcome in our good friend Damon Amendolara. DA, nothing weird ever happens on your show, right?
No. We are a clean operating machine. No slip ups, no mistakes. No, everything works perfectly cleanly on this show.
What's the silliest thing that's happened on your show this week?
Well, we could just go inside today. My producer, Mraz, is having a colonoscopy tomorrow, so he had to do a day's fast. So they told him, don't eat anything after breakfast this morning, which he gets up really early. Obviously, we get on the air at 6 a.m., so he ate something at 5 a.m. He was not supposed to eat anything until tomorrow after the procedure at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So try to imagine going, what is that, 28 hours or something like that without eating. He made it to the third hour of our show and then started eating cookies. And then by the fourth hour of our show began smelling his own sneaker because it was so wretched and foul, the inside of it, that it was distracting him from how hungry he is. So that was just today's show.
Oh, my God. I can't imagine most people going that long without food. I would just plead a medical exemption. That Mraz going that long sounds like just an unmitigated disaster, which, I mean, is kind of what you just described.
That's exactly right. Yeah, this is a fellow that likes his food, so we don't think that he'll be able to make it. But what we do want is a live stream tomorrow on Colon Cam. We're hoping to have that on the stream, have that on the show, so we can we can do a Twitch chat and narrate it play-by-play wise.
Now, we are streaming live on YouTube now, as of this week, basically. Our brand new YouTube page, youtube.com/@theteam980, plug. I can guarantee our audience there will be no colon cam. And we'll just, we'll put my pitch against your pitch and see who has more subscribers, DA has colon cam, we don't.
Yeah, that's probably a better way to draw an audience, is to say, no, you won't have to endure a colon cam.
Yeah. All right. Moving on from that, the only way that I professionally know how to, which is swiftly. DA with us, of course, the DA Show, morning 6 to 10 a.m. on CBS Sports Radio. So the big news here today, Damon, is that Jeff Bezos is apparently not going to put in on or bid in on the Commanders, that he is going to pass on doing that, maybe wait for the Seahawks, but certainly not at this time going to go in. Is that surprising to you as someone who's kind of watched this from a national level and looks at it league-wide? Hey, Bezos, that'd be great to have him as an owner, or maybe you thought it wasn't. What do you make of the news that he's out?
Well, anybody is better than Dan Snyder. So whether it's Jeff Bezos or Cookie Monster, somebody purchasing Washington away from Dan Snyder is a win for everybody. And that doesn't only include fans of the team. That includes just fans of the NFL, and I think just people that care about diplomacy, professionalism, equality, just not being a bad guy or not being a bully or what have you. Let's all hope that there is a sale, even if it's not Bezos. Secondly, I'm surprised just simply because his name floats around with every single potential franchise purchase. So we've heard the name for so long that it would be surprising if suddenly he pulled out. But look, ultimately, doesn't matter if it's Bezos or somebody else. I think the good news for any team that's being sold today via a fan interpretation is that all of these owners purchase these teams right now to be aggressive and to be win. It's so incredibly expensive to become an owner these days. You're talking about multi-billions of dollars. That nobody was just doing it to just kind of sit on their hands and collect a check and revenue sharing. That happens with older owners usually. It certainly does happen. But the new guys that are paying billions of dollars worth usually want to be aggressive and win. We're seeing this in Carolina with David Tepper. We're seeing this with the Mets and Steve Cohen. We saw this with the Clippers and Steve Ballmer. So I think the good news is whoever buys the Commanders is more than likely going to try to invest to win right away.
Yeah, definitely. That person seems like it'll be Josh Harris, who's obviously done a very good job with the Sixers. They've been contenders basically all of his ownership, and built towards long-term sustainability. The Devils are having their best year in a while. He owns them as well. So he seems to be the leader in the clubhouse right now. NFL draft around the corner as well. DA, I know you're going to be anchoring the coverage with Baldy and JLC on the 2400 Sports stream. Very excited to watch that. And I don't know, did you catch Mel Kiper's mock draft yesterday? Because I thought it was super interesting.
I did not, although I saw somebody wrote a story that said the Mel Kiper's mock draft is a disaster of mock draft. So, but I didn't see why it was a disaster.
I mean, in some ways it feels disastrous just because it's very different. But I think what you look at it, it's really not that disastrous. It's just he's I think ahead of where some people are going to wind up being. Like he's got Darnell Wright, the tackle out of Tennessee, going 9 to Chicago, and I that's surprising because he's a right tackle and his name's not Peter Skoronski and or Broderick Jones or Paris Johnson, but like there's a lot of people that really like that kid. I think the biggest one, the one I want to ask you about, is Anthony Richardson. He's got Tennessee trading up to 3rd to take Richardson ahead of Indianapolis. What do you make of that fit a year after they draft Malik Willis to be like, yeah, that didn't work out. Let's try again. Let's go Anthony Richardson.
Well, I don't blame the Titans if they're already looking for a better solution than Malik Willis, because he was pretty underwhelming last year, and I think they really wanted him by the end of the season to have shown them something, and I think that there was a little bit of a lack of faith in what he could do by the end of the year. I don't blame them for wanting more than that. I don't like Anthony Richardson for any franchise that wants him to play soon. I think that he's so incredibly raw. He's so incredibly unpolished. I don't trust a pro day or a crazy throw or something in gym shorts. I'm really worried about his inconsistency, and I would say that the only team that should draft him should be a team that won't touch him until his second season. Won't even put him on the field until his second season, even in any type of significant duty. I mean, of course, if he gets it in a 28-point blowout or whatever, but I just don't think you can even think about it. And are the Titans totally fine with Ryan Tannehill for a full season without having been tempted to break the glass in case of emergency? You might need 2 seasons to wait on Anthony Richardson. So a strong franchise that is patient and has a starting quarterback is the only place I think that it could work. And even then, I'm very leery because I'm just always skeptical on the guys that shine when the pads are off.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that's actually a good fit. I think Atlanta's probably the best scheme fit if they're going to try to play him immediately, because they're just going to run the football an absurd amount of time. And it's like, hey, Anthony Richardson, rushing total. It's not 1,000, over. Sweet, done. In the same way that Fields was last year. But they do have Tannehill, and I don't know if they care if they win this year in Tennessee either, because they seem to be rebuilding. So that'll be obviously interesting to watch. And again, DA will be part of the draft coverage for 2400 Sports, our digital outlet that you can watch on YouTube, Twitch, etc. We'll make sure we have all the details of that as we move forward over the next couple weeks. I think I'll be hopping on with you guys after the Commanders pick, so that's fun as well. Last thing on the way out, though, for you, sir. Speaking of your digital offerings, on your podcast this week, you talked to basically the guy who started sports radio. Tell me more.
Yeah, Jeff Simonian was actually, could be a familiar name for baseball fans. He owned the Mariners back in the late 80s, early 90s, but before that, he made his fortune in buying and selling radio stations. And so he bought and sold radio stations throughout the 70s and the 80s, and he purchased a signal in New York City on 1050 W. I forget the call letters. I think it's WHN at the time. Anyway, they had multiple stations, and he said, I think all sports on the radio can work. And his team, his advisors said, it'll never work. No way. And he said, no, really, it's New York. It's a huge audience. They love sports. It's an East Coast. He was only going to do this on the East Coast to try it. And everybody thought he was crazy. And ultimately, as a favor, because his other radio acquisitions did so well, they just basically gave him a mulligan and said, you know what, you can try it. We don't think it's going to work. The first year that WFAN switches to all sports in 1987, it's an absolute debacle. The ratings are terrible. The advertising's terrible. And Jeff tells me this story where he was on. He took a weekend to go near the beach and spend with the family because he was just so wrought with frustration and fear that this was not going to work because there was no ratings and no advertising. And he listened to the station, and he heard the same commercial over and over again, and it was for a discount funeral home. And he said that the tone was so depressing and that the buy was so small, and he kept hearing, and he said, this is a disaster. Everybody's just hearing our radio station and connecting it to a discount funeral home. This is awful, no matter how much we're making. Ends up that they were only going to pay WFAN if somebody bought a funeral. And he goes, I don't think anybody died that week. So we made no money on the entire advertisement. So it was the bottom of the barrel, and they didn't know if it was going to work. But a few things helped them. They were able to put Don Imus in the mornings. They found Mike and the Mad Dog, who were weekend guys. They started to get some penetration in the city, and they had the Mets broadcast, and they suddenly were good in the late 80s. And that all came together, and it took a while of tweaking. But for all of us that work in sports talk and all of us that listen to sports talk, it seems impossible to believe that once upon a time there was no sports talk. But once upon a time, the only sports on the radio were games, post-game shows sometimes, and occasionally like a night show of 2 hours on a news talk station. But there was never 24 hours on sports on the radio before 1987.
Yeah, and now look at it. They got you on the weekends. They got Mraz. They might have a colon cam. There's, I think maybe it's the full circle from the funeral sale, the discount funerals to colon cam. Maybe hopefully that's not too close to home. But yeah, it's sports radio. There's a little bit of something for everybody, you know?
Yeah, that's right. We've destroyed the genre, recreated it, burned it down, then recreated it. But it's a really cool conversation. It's part of my long-form interview podcast series called New York Accent. So if any of your listeners want to check out the origin of sports talk, they can find it anywhere they get their podcast. Just search either my name or New York Accent, and they can subscribe.
Yeah, New York Accent, a.k.a. as we call it on this show. Hey, we're podcasting here. David Amendolara, 6 to 10 a.m., CBS Sports Radio, and obviously New York Accent, the podcast, available everywhere. DA, always good to chat, my friend. Talk to you soon. Next week on the radio. Hopefully, I owe you a phone call off, but that's for off the air, you know?
Sounds good, Hoff.
All right, brother. See ya. Damon Amendolara, everybody. All right, when we get back, let's set the rest of the show up this way. Kevin Sheehan is going to join us at 6. We are going to probably do Never Read the Comments today. We might wind up pushing that to tomorrow with the breaking news. But let's talk a little NBA. We're not going to have a lot of time, so quick preview of the games tonight. Quick look back at the games last night next. And then back to the top story, Jeff Bezos not going to bid on the Commanders with Kevin Sheehan coming up at 6. the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Just a few quick minutes here on the NBA playoffs last night, and then we will get to Kevin Sheehan at the top of the hour. Kevin will join us to talk about our main story today, that Jeff Bezos is not going to bid on the Washington Commanders. That is the report from Puck News' Teddy Schleifer, who joined us earlier in the show. So, let's skip to the heart attack that Anthony Haney had last night. Anthony, your camera's not working right now, is it?
No, and I'm very frustrated because it just says something went wrong, and I keep refreshing and refreshing.
Did you restart the whole computer?
Oh, have I started the computer over?
Yeah. I feel like that's the next play.
Yeah, that's probably what I need to do.
Okay, so we'll get you doing that in a second. For right now, though, considering most people that are consuming us are listening on the radio, they don't know the difference. And I can just look over here. So if you're watching on the stream, hello, you get to see the side of my face now, so I can go turn and talk to Anthony. Overtime last night was nuts. It was so sloppy, and it's just kind of sometimes that's the way it is, but man, there was not playoff level basketball last night. LeBron with a huge turnover in OT. Kyle Anderson throws the ball to no one, and just ultimately the Lakers are able to pull it off.
Yeah, first of all, it shouldn't even have been in overtime. Anthony Davis somehow, some way, found a way to land on Mike Conley's feet. He goes to the line, knocks down 3 free throws. But, yeah, as you already alluded to, the turnovers in the overtime period were just, I don't know, maybe they were fatigued, tired.
Yeah.
It looked like they left everything out there. And, unfortunately for the Timberwolves, they have to get ready and play again in a couple of days. But that was a lot.
They got 3 days. They'll be fine. They got 3 days. They'll be fine. Rudy Gobert will be back. And obviously they'll get the winner of the Pelicans Thunder game tonight, which is a fun one. At some point, maybe later this week, depending on what happens with the Pelicans, we should have a Zion Williamson discussion because he's played 114 games in 4 years, and I would trade for him tomorrow if they decided to. I would do it yesterday if I was allowed to. But I think for last night in Carl, that game getting to overtime, being super competitive, watching what Trae Young did in the first game, not like monster numbers, but I think there's like tiers of players in the league, and the top tier is so small. The guys that can be the best player on a championship team, it's Steph, it's LeBron in his prime, maybe still LeBron now. He'd probably be the last guy maybe in that tier still. But at this point for LeBron, it also takes AD, who's right on the verge of that tier as well. But you have all these, let's say it's 5 or 6 guys, Jokic, Embiid, obviously Giannis is at the top of the list. And then you have kind of the next wave of players that all could win you a playoff series. They can't win you the finals. They can't win 4 series. But you take a first round, like they'll get you to the playoffs and win you a first round series. I think the reminder of a value of a player like that, like a Trae Young, obviously LeBron is well above that last night, and AD, they're both above it. But Karl Anthony Towns might be that good. He was incredible last night. He's just unhealthy for most of the year. He has some issues, but man, when that dude is on, he is ridiculous. Some of the shots he hit, one-footed runners, quick release threes, that's a bad man. And I'm fascinated to see what the Timberwolves do this offseason because they thought they were headed one way, and they very clearly had the Gobert trade is a nightmare. It's one of the worst trades in the history of the league. Gobert's not even bad.
I wasn't sure if they were going 1980s basketball.
What are we
why
doing?
Are we going too bigs?
Yeah. Look, Cat can stretch offensively, but defensively, he's not guarding threes.
Yeah.
What are you doing? But it's a reminder of just how good, how valuable any of those players are. And unfortunately, the Wizards, I don't think, have any player that is that good. That is unfortunate. Real sadly unfortunate. All right, it's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Now streaming live as well, youtube.com/@theteam980. Make sure you check us out there if you would like to watch the show. Coming up next, Kevin Sheehan joins us. He has the show on this very station. We'll get his take on Jeff Bezos being out on the Washington Commanders.
The Team 980 is always live on the free Odyssey.
It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. Also live on the free Odyssey app. Also streaming live on our new YouTube page. Make sure you check that out. And now, yes, this is us. We are live 6 to 7 o'clock each night as our show starts at 4. Kevin Sheehan now 10 to 1, except for when we ask him to do overtime and join us here in the afternoons. Sheehan, what's up, man? How are you?
Hoffman, what's going on?
I am well. I have one of those shows. You've had many of them over the years where you have the plan and you're ready to go. I was ready to go deep on the Spencer Dinwiddie, Kyle Kuzma drama, and then our boy Teddy Schleifer says, actually, Jeff Bezos is out on the Commander. So we blew up the rundown. Happy to talk about it with you. What was your reaction when you saw the news from Teddy earlier today?
That nobody likes Dinwiddie. Other than that, which, by the way, I think is true, it seems like he rubs everybody the wrong way. It's funny because Schleifer was on the show Friday with me, and on my podcast Friday. That's right, because the news came out late Friday. And I said, well, give me your guess. And he said, I'm going to take a wild swing at this thing. I think Bezos is going to get the team. So that's 5 days ago. And, Craig, that is really where we are on this thing. It's like I don't know if anybody really knows anything. My belief, based on the people that I have been talking to for 3 months now is that Josh Harris is going to get the team. He's going to pay a little bit less than $6 billion for it, and that, it's going to happen. I keep saying sooner rather than later, and I've been saying that for a month now, so it's not quite as soon. But now I think it's truly, going to happen very soon, and we'll see. But I don't think anybody other than Dan, Tanya, Bank of America, and Harris really know. And I think sometimes it changes because of the seller. I don't think it's the easiest seller of all time.
Yeah, no, I talked about that with Teddy a little bit, that it seems like even basic, blocking and tackling, if you will, to use that analogy, is difficult with him because he's just a difficult person. Why do you think, though, and I realize this is reckless speculation, but hey, we're sports talk radio hosts, so let's go. Why do you think it is that Bezos ultimately pulls out? Because if he wanted the team, it's his. He could pay a number that Dan can't say no to and would be absolutely crazy to say no to, no matter how much personal hatred is there. If he wanted the team, he'd have it. He doesn't, apparently. Why do you think that is?
I mean, I don't even know if describing it as him pulling out is even accurate. I mean, was he ever actually in, other than maybe dipping a toe by hiring Allen and Company to maybe look at the deal? I mean, I don't know why, but maybe it's because Seattle is just a more attractive buy for him for lots of reasons. Number one, they have a stadium. Number two, they have a fan base. And number three, it's much more home for him than D.C. is. I mean, you would have never said this 10, 15 years ago that Seattle or Denver are more attractive franchises than Washington, but they are in many ways. I mean, the upside here, because of the market, the demographics of the market, the federal government, and the number of corporate sponsorships with people who, sell to the federal government, all of that, the upside's huge, but you've got to pay for a new stadium more likely than not, and you have to spend significant customer acquisition dollars to reacquire old fans and to acquire new fans. Two things that you don't have to do things that you don't have to do in Denver or Seattle. So maybe it's as easy as he's waiting for Seattle because it's more attractive.
That makes a lot of sense. And you also, as you referenced, you don't have to spend the money on the stadium. So you're going to buy a less expensive franchise and then have way, way less to spend on the next big project in terms of a chunk of change that you'll need to do on something, which is the stadium, of course, practice facility as well. From the people you've talked to, what do you make of Harris's ability to unlock the RFK site? Because that was one of the big pulls of Bezos, was he's so politically connected, he knows how to lobby, and he's got all the cash in the world, so he could do things that others can't at that RFK site that might make it more feasible. Do you have faith that Harris can also do what needs to be done to get the team back to RFK if that's ultimately what they want to do?
I mean, the answer is I don't know, but this is what I would guess. I would guess based on the fact that he had to raise a lot of the capital, that he's probably got, 5 to 15 limited partners in his deal. I mean, it's not just him, Rails, and Magic. They had to go out and raise a lot more money from limited partners, investors, and, just to buy the team. So if that's the case, he's not in position like Bezos is to just pluck down, to pay for the stadium without any jurisdictional help. Bezos wouldn't need DC's help other than, the Department of Interior to actually sell or lease the land, and for the EC Council to clear the way from a zoning perspective. And one thing that I would just say and caution people on is that the RFK site, which so many of us have incredible memories of, that neighborhood is completely different than it once was. It's a more gentrified neighborhood. There is more affluence, certainly close to that RFK site, and it's possible that the people that live there don't want a stadium there. Not that the people that lived there years ago wanted the stadium there, but now they may actually be able to fight it financially. And perhaps have more influence. So that's always been a concern with that site. But clearly, Bezos would have an advantage in building a stadium anywhere he wanted to build a stadium because he doesn't need help.
Right. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Kevin Sheehan Show podcast as well with us here on the Team 980. So ultimately, what kind of timeline do you think we're looking at? Does this thing get run right up to the May meetings? Do we now with Bezos out of the way, theoretically, do we get an announcement? Like, are we finally doing the hey, he sold the team show later this week? Like, how long do you think this will take now that seemingly every barrier or other entry or other exit off the highway that doesn't lead to Josh Harris is seemingly not an option for Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way it's been explained to me is like there is, an announcement. Okay, Josh Harris has, he's won the bidding for the Washington Commanders, and now you have the process of all of the legalese, all of the documents that need to be drawn up, more due diligence, the league vote, which could happen certainly by the end of May at the next league meetings, but that there's probably 30 to 60 days after the announcement before there's a closing in which all of the documents, just like if you were to buy any business, you sign the final documents and the money gets transferred via wire. And it's official. I think there were 60 days, maybe it was June to August for the Penner-Walton group last year. So there's less vetting here on Harris. Obviously, he's already a small stakeholder in the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's been vetted already by the league. And so that process, I would think, would be quicker, but I don't know, 30 to 60 days is what I've been told from the time that, there's some sort of press release or press announcement that, the Josh Harris, if that's indeed the way it goes, that the Josh Harris group has, won the bidding and will be the next owner.
So that brings me to the final question, because Teddy, when he was on with us earlier, also on Twitter, was quick to stress there is still a fear amongst a lot of people around this sale that Bezos will reverse course, that there will be a change of heart, or that even Dan might go to Jeff and be like, hey, man, this is actually the deadline. There is, I'm about to sell this to Josh Harris. Do you want it? The price would be X. And Bezos goes, yeah, sure, and writes a check. What % do you give that?
I don't know. Teddy Schleifer last week on the show, I thought gave me something that I hadn't heard before. Maybe he had mentioned it before, or it had been reported before, is that Dan and Bezos actually met at the end of last year, which I thought was interesting. So, I guess it's always possible. I mean, Dan's going to try to get the biggest number, and remember the whole, period of time in which he wasn't going to sell to Bezos. He was excluded from the process of bidding. But maybe that's before Dan found out that the team wasn't worth $6 to $7 billion to anybody else, and maybe that's why Bezos has been, allowed back in. And maybe we just hit on one of the reasons, Craig, why it's not as attractive to Bezos anymore. Is there's been this up and down. If that's actually true with Snyder, and that he's only there because he's the highest bidder. But then again, maybe this is the team he wants. I don't know. I have no idea how to answer that question. I guess anything's possible, and only he and, Dan and Tanya and the people, at Bank of America probably really know. But, if the reporting today is right, it certainly sounds like it's Harris and that's it. The Apostolopoulos thing, remember Schleifer had last week, or maybe it was Front Office Sports, I forget, I'm getting confused with who's reported what, but that Apostolopoulos hadn't really arranged or put together the financing that Bank of America had been looking for. So that would leave Harris.
Right. Front Office Sports and AJ did have that. And AJ has also confirmed what Teddy reported earlier today as well. So, yeah, it seems like all roads, as they have for a long time, are pointing to Josh Harris. It'd be nice if this thing could actually get done and we could all move on with our lives. That would be cool. Instead, though, Kevin's going to probably talk about this on his podcast, and he's certainly going to talk about it tomorrow between 10 and 1 on this here radio station. Sheehan, appreciate you joining us. Always love talking to you. We'll do it again soon.
We'll be talking some Dinwiddie and Kuz tomorrow.
Yes.
Also. That was great. All right, thanks, Greg.
I'm jealous. I want to do that so bad. All right, see ya. That's Kevin Sheehan, everybody, with us on the Team 980. Maybe we'll get to some of that. Actually, Anthony, should we dive into that drama next, or should we stick with never read the comments today and get to the Dinwiddie stuff tomorrow? I kind of think we should do the Dinwiddie stuff today, and we can do
I like the
never read
Dinwiddie
the
stuff as
comments.
well.
Oh yeah, we're doing juicy basketball drama next.
DC has a new home for your favorite songs from the 80s.
It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. So we thought this was going to be our main story today, and then Teddy Schleifer wrecked the show, which is fine. It just, we had other stuff to talk about. Jeff Bezos apparently out on the Commanders. We've covered it all show long. Teddy, the guy who broke the story, joined us at 4:30. Highly recommend using the rewind feature on that if you want to check it out, or checking out the podcast on demand. Also, it's up on YouTube, youtube.com/@CraigHoffman. You can rewind to the full show on YouTube on 980. Basically, we got you covered. But we thought it was going to be the continued banter around the Washington Wizards, which started with Spencer Dinwiddie. Do we have the Dinwiddie audio, Anthony? Do you have it up over there? I'm not seeing it in the folder. Am I silly? Oh, I see what you did. You put it in the real things, with a real things label. Got it. So this is very long. We're gonna play parts of it here. Spencer Dinwiddie responding to banter about Kyle Kuzma, or from Kyle Kuzma about Spencer Dinwiddie after the Mavs and the Wizards played earlier this year. The Wizards won. At the time, the Mavs were pretty good. Obviously, they went sideways. Dinwiddie ultimately got traded. Kuz is looking for a big contract. These guys were teammates last year. They couldn't trade Dinwiddie fast enough. That's the setup. Here's what Dinwiddie said on a show called Run It Back. It's Michelle Beadle and Chandler Parsons and Shams Charania on FanDuel TV.
Oh, man. Didn't I just say I was petty?
Yeah, I know. Yes, please.
So here's the thing, right? And obviously I spent some time in D.C. with Kuz. What's that thing Draymond just said where he said insecurity is loud?
Yeah.
Right? So basically here's what happened, right? We lost to them. I was on the Mavericks. And obviously we have a MVP caliber guy and we're trying to be a championship caliber team. Just went to the Western Conference Finals, et cetera, et cetera. So I make a statement about, we need to be better. Understanding the culture and how games are kind of played in D.C. and saying, that's an unacceptable loss in that fashion. He decides to respond because I guess he felt like it was a shot at him. And I wanted to respond. My agent told me to stand down, that we had, bigger fish to fry, things to do, get to the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera. But, now I'm not in that environment. I'm in the playoffs. He's not. And, to address no, I'm just saying, to address the socialite, right? Like, there's a lot of guys in the NBA that really pour their heart and soul into basketball, are willing to do whatever it takes to win. There are a lot of guys that have different things that drive them and motivate.
All right, I'm going to stop it there. You kind of get the gist. Spencer Dinwiddie doesn't like Kyle Kuzma. He thinks he's motivated by other stuff. He called him a socialite. He said he's in the playoffs, or I'm in the playoffs, he's not, etc. Well, I'm going to let Kyle Kuzma respond for himself on this. Kuz on Twitter. Okay, so since I'm famous, Spencer Dinwiddie, let me give you all some clout. I'm usually unbothered by things on the internet, but I will not allow this delusional guy to continue to talk about my teammates and I. 1, insecurity. He says, here's a thread, which just cracks knuckles. Let's go. Insecurity is loud. The Wizards and I have so much real estate on Din Bleep Island. I can't say the pun that Kyle uses here. This guy got signed by a team, $60 million, and was traded before the season was over. What in the world have you won in this league? You've been bounced around like a basketball, my boy, which is, a good reminder that Kuz has a ring. Dinwiddie does not. He made the conference finals with the Mavericks last year. I believe that's the farthest he's ever gone in his career. 3, you can thank KD and Kyrie for spearheading the 34 wins before the All-Star break. They're 11-13 after the break for your playoffs. I think that is a fantastic point by Kuz. I cannot believe Dinwiddie said that. Like, people weren't going to check that. Dinwiddie also later says, like, hey, I'm the second option behind Mikal Bridges, and we're doing great. We're in the playoffs. And Kuz goes, second option? More like second point guard. My man, I watched you for 2 months at the end of your Wizards tenure being the second option, averaging 8, 4, and 4. Sounds good, but glad you're hooping now. And to be fair to Dinwiddie, he is playing better. He's averaging like 16 points a game with the Nets, but like a second option on a championship team, like Kyle Kuzma's got a lot better chance than that. And then 5, he goes, and yup, I got a bag coming. Stop hating. And last but not least, the only way you'll ever be worth your contract is if the NBA finally gives you your wish of getting paid in crypto. Check the markets. Has a stock market emoji trending down. Enjoy the clicks. Go Sixers, who the Nets play in the first round. Kuz wraps up a little bit later saying, I just don't like the false narratives with me. People use the way I dress or my celebrity against me. Don't let my confidence offend your insecurities. I'm a very driven person and strive to get better like I have been my entire career. If you knew my story, you'd rock with me more. I think Kuz comes out of this looking way better than Spencer Dinwiddie. Honestly, Spencer Dinwiddie kind of comes out of this looking like a clown. I think Dinwiddie makes some interesting points, and there are some valid points about the Washington Wizards, and I think Dinwiddie, who's been around some winners and on some winning teams, saw some things that he didn't like the way business was being done. Clearly, he thought Kuz was a problem there. But I think if you watch this team night in, night out, like, Dinwiddie stunk here. He was awful. And part of that was he was still coming back from injury. He's a better player than he showed here. But he's going to have to eat that. The reality is, Spencer Dinwiddie was a bad Washington Wizards basketball player, and that didn't have anything to do with Kyle Kuzma on the floor, nevertheless off the floor, the way that he dresses, etc. Number two, players are allowed to have lives. You don't have to be boring. Like, I think trashing Kuz for the way that he dresses or saying he's a socialite because he dates a model and likes to go to fashion shows on occasion, like, this dude also averaged 20 points a game this year and has seemingly gotten better every year of his career. And to say, like Dinwiddie did later, that, like, oh, he can't be the third star on a winning team, that's why the Lakers traded him. No, like, the Wizards wanted something in return back for Russell Westbrook. They didn't want to just give up Westbrook, and Kuz was kind of the prize piece at the center of that. And so it wasn't, like, one, to put credence in what the Lakers think about roster building when it comes to stars is stupid, because they've been terrible. When they finally gave up on Westbrook and got a bunch of guys who were much, much, much worse in terms of, Q rating and name value, they saved their freaking season. But for Kuz, like, I think Kuz responded in all the smart ways, left some of the other stuff unsaid. I think the crypto shot is hilarious because Dinwiddie was Mr. Crypto for a while. And it's like, yeah, that seemed like a poor investment, like the Wizards' investment in you. And, hopefully for you, crypto will bounce back like your career has since you left Washington. But for right now, like, I just, the fact that it's almost 2 years later and you can't keep the Wizards' name out of your mouth. I know you were asked about it, but you were also asked about it because you brought it up again on a different podcast. Like, next time you're asked about it, just say, like, yeah, like, I didn't have a great time there. We had some disagreements. I don't really feel like talking about this anymore, and move on. And I think for Kuz, like, it shows a level of loyalty that's appreciated by this organization. I think it's no coincidence that the team as a whole seemed to get along a lot better this year without Dinwiddie here and a couple of other guys that were problematic in that locker room last year. However, the most damning comments that I've seen today made about the Washington Wizards were not made by Spencer Dinwiddie. They were actually made by Corey Kispert. They weren't meant to be damning necessarily, but these are from earlier in the week. I just didn't see them till today. And if you want to talk about the actual problems with the Washington Wizards, don't get caught up in the hoopla of Kuzma versus Dinwiddie. Listen to what Corey Kispert had to say about this team this season and what needs to change going forward. We'll play you that audio next on the Team 980. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. So we just talked a little bit about the Spencer Dinwiddie, Kyle Kuzma back and forth. Dinwiddie on FanDuel TV, yappity yap. Kuz on Twitter, tweetity tweet. But to me, the most interesting thing I've seen about the Wizards culture this week actually were some quotes from the exit interview day on Monday that I just saw earlier this morning. And it was put out by Hoop District, our guy Neil Dalal, who joined the show on Monday to help us do the Wizards postmortem. And it came from Corey Kispert. And Anthony was able to hunt down the audio, so bravo, excellent producing, Sir Ant. And it talked about accountability and the reality that they lacked that this year in a major problematic way. Here's Corey Kispert, who obviously came on really strong at the end of the year, but is a part of this 35-win team.
It's hard to do the right thing all the time, you know. And when in tough conversations and accountability and being uncomfortable in conversations is like it's a hard thing to do over and over and over again. You know, it's a much easier thing to just kind of let things slide. And when you get a team full of guys who don't really don't really care about their feelings getting hurt and just want to win, that's when you're going to unlock something really, really special. And that's something that, you know, is not unique to our team. There are teams across the entire league that struggle with that too. And I think it's a majority. It's not, there's a minority of teams that are okay with accountability, you know? And, yeah, I mean, it's a commitment to doing the right thing over and over and over again. And it can be boring and it can be tough, but it's just what you have to do. It's the price of winning.
So to me, there's kind of two things at play here. One is a leadership element, and two is a personal responsibility element. The first is the personal responsibility. If everyone holds themselves accountable to do the right things, then you don't have to hold each other accountable. But then there's the leadership. This is why multi-level leadership is important. It's why it's important that you have players who set example, and by their sheer example, by the way they go about their work, everyone else is encouraged to do the right thing. Then you have people who say, you know, who are on guys and hold you accountable. And I honestly don't know who those people are for the Washington Wizards. That's not to say they don't exist. That's not to say that guys didn't get on each other. But it's not like Draymond Green is running around barking orders in the way that they are in Golden State, and that Steph Curry isn't the hardest working guy on the team, and he's the best player. So if Steph's doing his work, what's your excuse, not Steph Curry, one of the 10 greatest players possibly ever to lace up a pair of sneakers? I don't even know why I said possibly. He's got to be top 10 all time. That's a different discussion for a different day. I don't want to set the internet on fire. It's why your coaches, hey, we have a standard. This is what it is. And it's assistant coaches, it's head coaches, it's your GM and you know, whoever from the front office is around the team on a regular basis. Like, you need that leadership at all levels. So there is a culture of accountability, not one guy going, hey, we got to get extra shots up. Hey, we got to run this right. Hey, we got to do this. Because if that's the case, that voice gets old real fast. There has to be a standard of excellence that exists. And Corey's right. That is not something that is unique to the Wizards. But to have that recognition for a second-year guy like Kispert is, I don't think speaks well. I think that is, you know, an organizational failure in a way, even if it's a common one throughout the league, that, you know, Tommy and his staff and Wes and how, you know, his staff handles, you know, both the players and how they operate the operation is something they're going to have to look at. I don't say that as like it's a fireable offense. How dare they? It means they suck at their jobs. Like, it just means it's a major problem, and they've got to fix it. Otherwise, you know, the nature of the league is there will be other people doing those jobs, let's say a year from now, 2 years from now. Wider thoughts on the Wizards' shortcomings this year from Corey Kispert. And I thought all these comments were super interesting when he made them earlier in the week. I just wound up happening to see them today.
I think it started early on. Like, the reason why we couldn't fix these problems was because they're deep-rooted in what we've been doing for the year, you know? It's not just like a quick and easy fix like you guys seen. Like, it's hard to change these things sometimes. And I think it's a mix of, you know, accountability from player to player, from coach to player, from player to coach within our organization. I think that needs to be addressed and fixed, and from what I've seen, we're taking steps to do that. And then I also think it's a little bit of like a identity issue. And it's easy to point fingers and, put blame on injuries and circumstance. And, other teams figured it out. And there has to be a standard to which we play stylistically and aggression and things like that, no matter who's on the floor. And with our lineups, so many different lineups we put on the floor throughout the year because of those injuries, not having anything to kind of fall back on and really trust as far as this is the way we're going to play all year long, no matter what, kind of did us in. You saw a lot of just kind of floating around and guys doing whatever, when in reality, that's just not what wins. So we're definitely going to take some steps to improve that this offseason and be better next year.
To me, that's the most important thing that was said. That last half of that answer that says we don't have an identity, we don't have a way that we play, is probably the best description of a damning of Wes Unseld and the coaching staff that I've seen. But it is certainly deeper than that, in that it has tentacles in the front office and it has a lot of tentacles up and down the roster. It's not like they didn't give them a plan, but how well do you execute it? How dedicated are you? Or do you just get out there and kind of stand in the corner and let Brad cook, let KP cook, let Kuz cook? Or do you have a system of offense? What makes the Warriors, and I hate always using them as an example, but like the best teams over time, like if I tell you, hey, how did the 2014 Spurs play? You know. They were a driving kick team that hunted corner threes, and then if all else failed, they had Tim Duncan on his last legs, but still cooking. Obviously, the earlier Spurs teams played through Tim Duncan and the pick and roll with Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili. The Lakers and the Bulls with Shaq and Kobe and Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, all coached by Phil Jackson, they have the triangle offense. The Warriors, to come back to this team, have this incredible whirling dervish motion offense where there's split cuts and off-ball screens and on-ball screens. And, when it gets tight in playoff series, they run the Steph Draymond pick and roll and try to generate 4-on-3s, or they can dump it down to Draymond in the post and like but like the motion is the defining thing. If I talk to you, a Wizards fan who's watched many of the games, and go, hey, what's their offense? Can you describe it? What's it look like? What do they do? Well, when Kispert's in there, he's running around like crazy. And we talked about this with Glenn a bunch. We talked about this with Christy. We talked about this with everybody that came on. Like, the way Corey plays offense, to me, is the way that NBA offense should be played. Basketball should be played in general. Lots of player movement, because what happens when you move one piece is the rest of the pieces have to move to adjust to keep the proper spacing and floor balance. And that doesn't happen when you watch one guy go ISO. It allows the defense to lock in on exactly what they're doing. And by the way, the Wizards don't have the shooting, basically outside of Kispert, to just stand there around a Brad Beal creating and space the floor and know, hey, if someone double teams, you can fire the ball across the court and get a good three, because if it winds up in most of the players' hands out there, the defense isn't that scared. Kispert, Porzingis, Kuz on some nights, but like, it's not like they got a multiple 40% three-point shooters out there. They kind of got one, and it's Kispert. And then you have a bunch of other guys in the high 30s that are okay, that are fine, but not terrifying in the way that Kispert was. So that's not to say like, oh, Corey Kispert's the greatest basketball player on the team, or Corey Kispert's amazing. Just when he was out there and like he was more of a focal point on certain stretches of offense, they actually played a way that was identifiable. Other than that, it was like, let's run some pick and roll with these guys and see what happens. And you'd have nights where Kristaps Porzingis was really effective in that pick and roll, and they'd win the basketball game. You also have halves where he was really effective and scored 20 points and then wouldn't get the ball or wouldn't score again, wouldn't take a shot until 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Why? Because you don't have a consistent brand of play. And that is ultimately, if they are going to build around this core, what they need to figure out moving forward. Who are we? What is it that we do? How do we play? What is our pace? And then in the half court, how do we generate offense? Because the lack of consistency in that is, I think, the defining problem, or the 1B of defining problems with 1A is they're not a good defensive team, which obviously impacts a lot of things as well. I would say this too, combining what Corey's saying here and what Tommy said earlier in the week about Brad probably shifting more off ball in the future. I think a Warriors-esque type of motion, a mini version of that, maybe not quite as whirling dervish because you also don't have a Draymond playmaker that you can rely on, although they hope Xavier Cooks can be helpful in that regard, but he ain't Draymond Green. But that you have two 40% three-point shooters with Kispert, with Beal on the floor together, moving around. Davis is a good cutter. Have some of these guys, and Porzingis also is a very unique player, and Kuz, who's a great cutter. Like, if you could start getting those guys in motion, now you're talking about the potential to be a top 12, let's say, NBA offense. Last thing for Kispert, because it did sound, actually, I'll play this after the break, and then we'll get into real things. Because there was one comment in particular that sounded almost like a little bit of a shot at Tommy Shepard. There's no way Corey meant it that way. I don't think Corey was like, hey, Tommy said we had injuries, and I just don't think that's an excuse. But he did say, like, injuries can't be an excuse. Other teams figured it out. And Tommy kind of backed off some of the injury stuff and said it wasn't good enough on Monday. So I think that should be noted as well. But he was asked to expand on the injury comment. Play that sound for you next, and then we will do real things, real people said, into real microphones. It's the Hoffman Show, 4 to 7 each and every day right here on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. Let's tell you first, though, what's trending.
Here's what's trending on the
It's the Hoffman Show, wrapping up here on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app. NBA play-in tournament tonight. Bulls Raptors in just a little bit. Thunder Pelicans later. By the way, if you have not watched the Thunder this year, you are missing out on a player who's going to finish top 5 in MVP voting in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That dude is sick. And it's kind of there's so many storylines, and we'll probably get into them tomorrow, Friday, kind of as the playoff picture solidifies. But the Clippers running out of time with Kawhi and PG's contracts, and they've got the Suns now in the first round, and all that. And that trade is going to be looked back on as one that's like, okay, they swung, but if they don't hit anything ultimately, and those guys leave without ever even making the NBA Finals, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander turns out to be awesome, that's going to be a giant what if. Obviously, look, like, you try, but man, Shai has turned out to be great. He's playing tonight. And tomorrow maybe we'll get into the Zion Williamson discussion of what the Pelicans do with him moving forward as he's about to enter year 5. I can't believe that. It still feels like, he's like a rookie. He's missed some games. No, he's missed the better part of 3 or 4 seasons, played just 114 games. As for the Wizards, though, wrapping up the comments from Corey Kispert that we got our hands on. He said them in the press exit interview earlier in the week. The lack of culture of accountability, the lack of an identity, and got a good question from Commanders Prime. Rocky on Twitter says, the Warriors and other teams have the personnel to operate the modern offenses. Do the Wizards? Like, yeah, they do. They have the offense isn't the problem. Like, they have a incredibly skilled unicorn-style big in Porzingis. They have Kispert, who's a great shooter. They have Beal, who's an all-around, can do everything offensive player. Kuz is a really versatile, skilled offensive player. Like, yeah, they should be able to run around and create some havoc and do some things. I guess the question is, like, are these guys basketball IQs high enough to do all this? That's I guess a valid question, because otherwise, why aren't they? I do think at times I watch them and go, this isn't a very smart basketball team. It just is. These guys, they're getting on by the fact that they're incredibly skilled, where the Warriors, and what elevates them is they have the combination of skill and intellect, and obviously they have extreme skill. But I think that would be the question. But I would say the answer is yeah. Like, they do have it. They can be much better. Let's put it that way. They need to supplement some of the pieces better and have more of an identity, because that also gives people confidence. If you know exactly not only what you're doing, but what you're not doing, that can be empowering. As for Kispert, he was asked, can you expand on the injury thing? Because unlike some others who have said, like, injuries played a huge role, Kispert says, like, yeah, they definitely mattered, but other teams figured it out. We had to do that. We didn't. So here's Corey Kispert responding to a request to expand on that.
Injuries are a part of the game, and it happens to everybody. It happened to me this year. It happened to Brad. It happened to Kuz. It happened to KP. Like, it happens to everybody. And going in that there's going to be injuries, and part of your contingency plan as a team is to budget for that. And guys need to, part of that is what happens before the injuries occur. Guys need to know exactly what they're supposed to do on the floor at all times. And, when guys do get hurt, there's a shift in what you need to do on the floor. And there's got to be better communication amongst players about that, from player to player, and communication from coaches to player and players to coaches. And it's across the board. And I just think that a lot of the times this year when guys dropped out, everyone kind of looked around and was like, okay, it's my time to go. And I was guilty of that too. And when in reality, there just needs to be a collective effort to reassess, in the moment. Okay, this guy's hurt. What needs to change? You change this. I'll change this. We all change that. And you can absorb injuries. And teams make, you see teams that win 50, 60 games a year. They're really good at absorbing injuries, and that's part of it.
I'm trying real quick to look up Corey Kispert's major in college. I don't see it, but I'm going to guess he's like an organizational communications major. Talking about managing up, managing down. I got to ask, we're going to try to get Corey Kispert on the show this summer. That's Anthony. Write that down in the notebook. We got to get Corey Kispert on the show. He was my favorite interview at Media Day, and we never had him back on the show, and that was a terrible job out of us. So we're going to try to have Corey Kispert soon. All right. With that said, I think it's very well put. Like, you can't just plan for success. Now, as we talked about with the third quarterback thing yesterday, you shouldn't plan for abject failure. Well, we're screwed. What do we do now? You figure it out when you get there because you're already up a creek without a paddle. But you have to plan for, or at least be able to quickly adapt when things don't go initially according to plan. And it sounds like they did not do a good job of that this year. Some of that is player-to-player communication. Hey, I need to do this. I need you to do that. But some of that also obviously emanates from the coaching staff and from the players giving feedback to the coaching staff as well. All right. That's the Wizards stuff for today. We'll continue to talk about them, obviously, more as we move towards the draft lottery. And then we probably won't talk about them that much because that's the nature of things. But free agency this summer, certainly going to be a big deal. Okay. With that, it is time to do the thing we do at the end of every show, which is real things real people said into real microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11. Not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All right, we just got one for you today, but it's been a day full of NBA drama. So what does Russell Westbrook have to think? Russell Westbrook, remember, Clipper, about facing the Phoenix Suns and Kevin Durant in the playoffs.
No, nothing. That would be normal for me. There's no, I think people still think there's some beef or something. There's no beef of any sort. I think that's the good narrative for for media, for people to talk about. But there's no beef, man. I got nothing but respect for him and things he's done with his career, and happy to see him back from injury. There's no beef at all, but he knows I'm gonna compete, and I know he's gonna compete, and that's all it is.
Here's the thing about Russell Westbrook. When he gets out on the floor, it's going to look like there's beef, whether there actually is or not, because Russell Westbrook could play pickup against his mom, and Russell Westbrook would yell at his mom. That's just who Russell Westbrook is. He's nuts, and it's one of the things I loved about. I appreciated Russell Westbrook way more watching him each and every day because he brought an intensity and a care and a give a bleep to each and every possession in a way that few guys can, and that is a skill. There are other things about Russell Westbrook that drove me bananas and things that I think could make him a better basketball player if he would either control or work on or whatever. But that dude cares. And actually kind of, obviously there was some hard feelings for a while, but that certainly sounded like a guy who's past it, over it. So good for them. It should be a really fun series. All right, we'll see you tomorrow, 4 o'clock. It's the Hoffman Show, Team 980, always live on the free Odyssey app.
After 23 years of controversy off the field,